Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So, hello everybody. Thank you very much for attending the third of the SPP Canada chapter events. On va faire la session en anglais aujourd'hui, mais j'ai vu pour poser votre question en français. Les deux présentateurs peuvent répondre dans les deux langues. So, please, French or English, no problem. The presentation today will be in English. And for future events, we're going to start working on how we're going to be introducing some of the slides in both English and in French. We will also be making some of the slides available after this event, available both in English and in French. So this session is to deploy, the topics today are around deploying a sustainable procurement initiative, which will be introduced by Annick, who is the ESG procurement program advisor for CBC Radio Canada. We also will be talking about an introduction to sustainable buildings by Dr. Caroline Hachem-Vermette, who will actually be going first today. So Caroline is the associate professor for building, civil and environmental engineering at Concordia University. So I will do my usual, as I do at each of these sessions. So just a reminder of how the SPP chapters are being held. There are three different types of chapter. There is a country chapter, of which this is the SPP Canada chapter. There are specific topic chapters, such as Scope 3, and then industry chapters. So I encourage you all to have a look at the SPP website so you can look at the different chapters and get involved or join whichever chapter most suits your interests. So when we started the SPP chapter earlier this year, these were some of the topics of which we said that we would be taking you through. Today, we're going to be talking about best practices and also some of the approaches around how you can reduce your emissions with smart buildings and smart architecture. So we're still staying on target with our agenda, but we certainly are going to be welcoming any topics that you'd like to discuss for 2025 and onwards. So one small reminder, please join the SPP Canada chapter. Actually, we've updated that now. We're up to over 90 members. So we're well on our way to our target of hitting 500 members. So please join us at SPP Earth and on the SPP Canada chapter. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to myself or Carsten, the other co-chair for the Canada chapter. Okay, with that, I will hand over to Caroline to give us an introduction into sustainable buildings. Caroline, I'll stop sharing and please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Can you see my screen first?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Richard, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for attending. So as mentioned, my name is Caroline Hachem-Vermette. I'm Associate Professor at the Faculty of Building, Civil and Environmental Engineering at Concordia University. So I'll be talking today about sustainable building practices. I included some introductory principles just to be sure that everybody is on the same page. So I apologize if it is too introductory for some of you, but again, I will be very happy to answer more complex questions toward the end. So what I will be including in this presentation is first what is sustainability and why it is needed. I will not go in detail about what is the principle from where it comes, but why again it is needed, especially in the building domain and the building practices. So really to link it to the importance of building sector to achieve sustainability. Then I will be talking about sustainable building practices. I will give selected examples, especially the passive design and net zero energy buildings, because those are some practices that are quite in demand and they are quite applied now. And I will be finishing this discussion by talking a little bit about the method of measuring sustainability. So what is sustainability? Basically, there are many definitions, and sometimes it means something different between different sectors, even between different people, even sometimes even between different people working in the same company. So what it means to us, it's really very different, and that's why in academia and now even in more application, we are trying to adopt one specific definition that is that define basically sustainable development as the development that try or aim to meet the need of the present without the present generation without basically compromising the need of future generation. So this is the definition that is adopted by the United Nations. And as we know, and maybe many of you saw these goals before, these are the 17 goals that were proposed by the United Nations as a way and practical way to achieve sustainability. These goals, they can be grouped into the three main pillars of sustainability, which are the economic, the environmental, as well as the social pillars. And some of them even they are at the intersection between two or more or three of these pillars. So why it is important, and it's important to think about sustainability more seriously and more in a systematic way, because basically of all the climatic event and climatic disasters that we are dealing with, these are not new. Some people might argue that they always during the life of the earth maybe such events happen, but the issue is that these events are happening now more frequently and in more extreme way. So from hurricanes to flooding, to heat waves, to ice storms, all these we are seeing them in a frequent way, in a way that they, the different organisms on the planet as well as a human being are not able to adapt really fast to the change. So basically we should consider these events as radical wake-up call for us to really think about what to do and how to enhance sustainability again to be applied in more serious and systematic way. So why should we care, especially here when I mention or I ask this question is when in with respect to the buildings and building sector as a part of my domain of work. Talking about buildings, because buildings are basically responsible for about 40% to 70% of world carbon emissions. And this is a really huge percentage, and that's it. The other huge sector is the transportation sector. So that's why a lot of talks at the level of the government as well as with our industry partners here at Concordia University and other research institute, we really have a lot of discussion about buildings, building material, building systems, in a way to reduce their impact on the environment. In Canada, just to give you a little bit of statistics that again put this in kind of perspective, buildings are responsible for 33% of all the energy that's used, 50% of natural resource consumed, 12% of non-industrial industrial water used, 25% of landfill, and so on and so on. So we see how much really buildings are responsible for different impacts that not only impact the environment, the air that we breathe, but also our health. So now going a little bit into the buildings and sustainable buildings and the green buildings. Again, there are a lot of these notions that sometimes we don't know what is what. So what is the difference between green and sustainable buildings? And that's, again, we keep hearing that. So green buildings basically are, or if we talk about green building, is a label for the process of design and construction of buildings. So it can be, as you see here in this table, there are different type of green building programs that kind of consider different factors as is shown here. While sustainable building, basically it refers to the goal of designing and constructing buildings that has reduced impact on the environment. So we have to kind of separate those notions so we understand what we are aiming for. Green building programs, as I mentioned, there are a number of these that range from those that are not, so inclusive or aggressive in their goals to those that are really aggressive. But if we want to look at these, criteria that are shown here, I just want to highlight that actually energy efficiency is a kind of one of the primary goal and primary focus of many of these energy or green building programs. So again, that's bring us a little bit more to the idea why energy efficiency, materials that relate to energy consumption and energy efficiency are very important. Just a few fundamental principles of green buildings. So we need, or most of these green building programs that I mentioned, look at efficiencies in different systems of the building, including structural efficiency, energy efficiency, water efficiency, materials, and waste and toxic reduction. So these are the basic principles that all or the majority of green buildings and green building program try to achieve. For structural efficiency, it aims basically to minimize the environmental impact that is associated with all life cycles of the building, from the type of from the raw material extraction to manufacturing to the end life, including the operation of the building. Energy conservation, it aims to reduce the energy consumption of the building, and these depends on many factors. I will go a little bit more in depth into that when I'm talking about the building, the different types of building programs. So for example, location of the building shape, insulation, windows, efficient ventilation, etc., are all these very important parameters that allows us to reduce energy consumption. For the water efficiency, it aims basically at minimizing water consumption through using water that is being collected, used, purified, and reused. The material, we need to think about a material that has a low environmental cost and do not really contribute to indoor air pollution. For example, materials that go into the construction of walls, construction of roofs, including thinking about recycled material and reclaimed materials. Doors and windows that helps into reducing energy consumption. Floor covering, again, to reduce material use through recycled materials and also reduce off-gassing. Roof materials to have reflective green roof, PV panels. PV here stands for photovoltaic systems or photovoltaic panels that allows to generate renewable energy from solar radiation. And energy efficient appliances. So these are the type of materials that we can also think about to reduce the environmental impact. Now, the last part is related to the construction waste reduction, and the construction waste is really can present an important issue in the construction because it can account to about 10 to 30% of the municipal waste stream. And how the reduction of waste can happen. Basically, it actually need to happen from the end part. We need to start here at the part where the waste is generated, and we need to avoid producing waste. We need to reduce. That's what we are thinking about the building design from the early stage. We need to think about ways to reduce the waste during the construction, the reuse of the material as much as possible and whenever it is possible, recycling of the material, and finally, really the waste will be reduced just for the minimum produced. Now, as I mentioned, there are many building standards that they kind of think about incorporating some of these principles. There are the green buildings that I mentioned before, sustainable buildings, and so on. What I want to focus on today is the passive house. Passive house, basically passive house that's written in the German, German writing as you see here, and the passive house in 2 words, and net zero energy buildings. So starting with the passive building design, the passive house standard. So again, to clarify the differences, the passive house standard is basically a brand. It's a standard that focus on radically reduce the requirement for space heating and cooling. And there are specific measures that we need to achieve to get this certification of passive house. That's mean what are these main criteria? You need to have the space heating, energy demand, or cooling, if it's a cooling dominated climate, to not exceed 15 kilowatt hour per square meter per year for net living space. So that's one of the main criteria that need to meet. The other criteria is that to have the total energy demand and should not exceed 120 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. And the third criteria, it has to have a minimum air tightness, which is about the 0.6 air change per hour under 50 Pascal pressure. So this is under again under experimental conditions. What about the passive house that is written in this way, in two words? Basically, these are principles rather than a brand name. So it's not like the passive house that we have specific criteria that we need to achieve. And if you don't achieve, you don't get the certification. It's mostly a number of principles that helps helps the occupants, help companies to achieve a reduction in energy consumption while being at the same time comfortable and ecological. So it's not a brand name. Again, it's a construction concept, and it relies above all on the holistic approach. So we need to really think about many and different aspects of planning at the same time. So we need to think how, for example, we maximize solar gain, for example, into a building, in the same time provide shading and provide reduction of this heat gain when it's not needed. So we need to think about a different principle in the same time. Now I want here to highlight this graph that actually makes us more understand why it is important, this passive design principles. This is the way I like always to give this graph actually for this illustration to my students, because it shows that in the building operation and energy consumption, the most energy consumption is associated actually with the design, which is the tier 1 here. So basic building design from the design, the location, the site design, the landscape, the shape of the building, the type of the material that we are using, that have the most important, the most impact, and the most important basically kind of a effect on the total energy consumption of the building. So that's where we can put a lot of impact in the beginning without having to increase the cost. Then the next stage will be thinking about other passive systems, like for example natural ventilation, like daylighting and so on. And then comes the mechanical equipment that will basically fulfill the rest to achieve comfort. But in the same time, if we work and kind of invest in these first two stages, the cost both for the equipment as well as for the energy, the operating energy, will be much less. What about net zero energy buildings? Again, for net zero energy building, there is a lot of definitions. The definitions that we usually use is a building that can generate energy from renewable energy over the year as much as it uses. So that's a main definition that we use. It's becoming more and more feasible. In the beginning, it was, especially in Canada, was designed mostly as a demonstration project. It was more expensive. Now it's becoming feasible. Again, there are different definitions for and definitions of metrics for net zero energy that vary from a place to the other. But again, the common principle are the fact to consider that these are exemplary building that can minimize energy requirement and the use of renewable energy to kind of fulfill the needs and the demands of the building. For the energy efficiency, there are a number of measures that they help in increasing or improving the energy efficiency, including the design strategies. And here I'm showing a quick diagram that they again show this idea of the integrated or holistic approach that consider the envelope of the system, that's mean facades, roof, floor, etc., and all the criteria related to them, the site of where the building is located, and the building form. These are, important elements that work together to help in improving energy efficiency. There are different other features that are directly related to the materials and the products that we use. For example, high performance envelope, air barrier systems, daylighting, sun control and shading device, careful selection of windows and glazing, and so on. So once the building load are reduced, loads then can be met with efficient equipment, efficient mechanical system, efficient lighting system, lighting control, heat pumps, etc., that can help us again to reduce the energy consumption. And again, we remember the diagram or the illustration that I showed before. The less we have energy consumption from passive methods, the less we need, the less we need energy that is provided from mechanical systems. Once these two steps are done, energy efficiency and energy efficiency energy efficient mechanical systems, we need to think about generating renewable energy, and this comes usually from photovoltaic panels that can be designed and they installed on the roof or on the facades of buildings or in the surrounding areas, solar water heating systems, and wind turbines. All these are systems that can generate renewable energy on site. Now, having gave you this general view, how we can measure sustainability. I'm sure that many of you have encountered these methods and maybe work with them. Life cycle assessment is a very thorough method that can be adapted to the need of the or to the objective that we are dealing with. So it's a method to analyze and assess the environmental impact that associated with a product, for example, can be a small product up to a building. And even in some cases, we are doing this life cycle assessment on a whole neighborhood and whole districts. It can be applied to services like waste management. It can be even applied to activity like consumption activities. And the life cycle assessment, basically, if we are conducting a holistic life cycle assessment, need to take into account all stages of a product, from the raw material extraction to the material manufacturing, building construction, building use, and then here I'm giving the example of building because it's basically again the topic that I mostly deal with, to the end life of a building, or it can be end life of any product that we are working with. The life cycle assessment usually is divided into 4 main steps. The first one is to decide for the goal and scope of the product. It can be where we can put the boundary of the boundary conditions, what we are dealing with and what we are excluding. Then the inventory analysis, where we basically kind of get information about each component of the product that we are working on. Then the impact assessment. In this case, we need to assess the impact of each of those components on different criteria, or different assessment criteria. Can be on the emissions, GHG emissions, can be on the maybe site and land use, can be water pollution, etc. And finally, the last step is to basically analyze this information and have improvement assessment and interpretation. So what we can do to improve this product. There are also different, more simple measures that we can use sometimes, especially if they are more relevant. For example, embodied energy. That means how much energy it's consumed according in each stage of the life cycle of the building, or in a specific stage. The operating energy, and this is mostly during the operation or the use of a product in the building. It's in buildings, is very important part, because it include all the time of where building is in use. The durability and externalities, these are some of the measures. For the embodied energy, there is 2 forms of embodied energy. There is the initial embodied energy that comes with the material from during the fabrication to the end of the life of the material, but there is also the recurring embodied energy that's due to the for example the maintenance of a material, the replacement of material, and so on. I'm giving this as just a definition because these are some principle or some concepts that we need to work with when we are conducting the life cycle assessment, and that's where the scope of the life cycle assessment can be very important because we can decide which of those principles we want to work with or concepts. There are two types again of energy use. There is the primary energy and secondary energy. Usually the primary energy is the energy that's on the at source without taking into account all the loss, and the secondary energy is the energy that comes to our home basically, and we use it readily basically to be used in different aspects of our life. So approximately there is 1/3 of Canada's secondary energy that is used in the operation of buildings. And why operational energy is important? Because basically it allows us to compare between alternative building technologies and be able to choose which one is the most appropriate. So again, I went through these definitions because it allows us to determine what type of energy or what type of concepts we want to focus on in our life cycle assessment. In the life cycle assessment, we want also to remember that the scope allows us basically to determine where we want to focus. If it is there are studies that they maybe focus on gate to gate study or cradle to gate. That's been from the raw material up to the manufacturing, and there are more comprehensive studies that do cradle to grave. That's been from the raw material extraction up to the demolition or the discarding of the material. While and now, especially with the circular economy, we work on cradle to cradle. That's been from the raw material up to maybe the new life of a material. So with this, just again, I wanted to remind by this concept, and I'd like to remind all of us that sustainability needs all of us, and that's why I thought that the buildings can be very important part to think about. And thank you, and I'll be happy to take questions. I think it's at the end, right, Richard, the questions?
Yeah, I think, Carsten, we did say that today we're going to add 15 minutes of flexibility at the end of this session. Carsten, are we going to do the couple of questions now if we've got some on the Q&A?
We have two questions here, Caroline. The first one, the passive house saves 75% of heating costs from the slide. This is what was shared. The question is, do these savings offset the cost of building a new passive house, i.e. when designing a new building if passive elements are included at the point of construction? So I guess, what is the payback period usually for these kind of constructions? So I guess the question is, what kind of savings would you generally be able to generate, and what would be the additional construction cost usually associated with a passive house? So when would be the break-even point? If that's how I understand.
Yeah. Okay, that's actually a very good point, and that's a continuous point of debate between researchers. It's always, we have a question related to cost and pay time period. So what I want to mention about the saving is mostly on the saving on the heating cost if we are in cold climate like Canada, or cooling cost. So it's basically on the energy consumption for heating and actually cooling. If it is well designed, it can be also reduce energy consumed for cooling. Regarding the cost and the increase in cost, at the beginning, a few years ago, it was let's say more costly. Now more and more, the material, especially with more mass production and more kind of demand, the costs are becoming a bit let's say more affordable. Still, I think the last study that some colleagues did, they demonstrated that the increase would be within the 10%, that not much larger than that. But again, this can increase in kind of a front cost can be reduced later on or recuperated through the reduction in energy bills.
Exactly. We'll share a calculation in the chat soon, just to let you see and visualize that. The second question, it's very Canadian. Living in Canada, we have a lot of snow in the winter. That's the prediction, especially for this year. Are PV cells an effective addition with the long winters, as well as risk of coverage from snow?
Yes, that's a very good question, and that's actually something that we really work with different, let's say, people and researchers and that are working on PV installation on buildings. So yes, snow coverage will affect the efficiency and the production basically of the PV. So they have to be snow free, and that's why we encourage really the high tilt angle, so that the PV will be designed on a kind of a steep tilt angle, so it allows the sliding of the snow. And we had actually some experiments that we did, kind of comparison, and higher angle, let's say 45 degrees up to 50 degrees, which is in some places is quite common. It can really help significantly in reducing the snow accumulation on the PV panels. Also, facade, integration, especially for tall buildings, for multi-story buildings, can be very good option as well.
Thank you, Caroline. Very good questions and very good answer. Thank you so much. Just mentioning that I put into the chat a link to a news flash that came out this morning. So you'll know the Buy Clean initiative down in the United States, and there's a particular focus now on subsidizing, giving grants, of course, to green construction materials. So you're mentioning now that those materials are getting cheaper in all respects. So this is really about embodied carbon and so on in those materials, and this just came out this morning. So I'm just sharing it for interest to the group. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carsten. And Caroline, thank you. That was a whirlwind masterclass in
hopefully not too basic. Hopefully not too basic.
No, it was brilliant. I think I know you're literally just chipping the surface there with that. Yes. I think we probably need to do a 2-3 year course with you to get to get all the knowledge. But I think yeah, thank you so much. And I think the benefit here for everyone is, when you're speaking to your suppliers, when your companies are looking at potentially investing in a new factory or a new facility, maybe with some of this nomenclature, with some of this background, you can start introducing the thought process to start thinking about how you can really embed sustainable buildings, and that will really help you with your Scope 3 emissions and your footprint in operations in general. So, Caroline, thank you so much. Excellent. Okay, so we'll now hand over to Annick. Please, Annick, share your screen and take us through some of the best practices that you've seen and with your sustainability implementations.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you hear me well, and can you see
Perfectly.
The screen? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. As I was, introduced, my name is Annick Champoux. I'm the ESG Procurement Program Advisor at CBC Radio Canada, and I also worked 16 years in the federal government doing procurement and also sustainable procurement. So let's get going. My goal for today would be that everyone present to this presentation take a special action towards sustainable procurement. That's my goal for today, and that's how I put the agenda together. First, I'll give you some context on what CBC Radio Canada is and what type of organization we are. I hope you all know us, but we'll make sure we're all on the same page. Then I'll talk a little bit about sustainable procurement, and I will be more on some concepts and also how we did it at CBC Radio Canada to give you some concrete examples and some tips and tricks to be able to start sustainable procurement today. So please don't hesitate to put a question in the chat, and someone can stop me. I'm happy to take questions as we go. So let's start with who CBC Radio Canada. I hope you know it's a national public broadcaster, and we're there to celebrate Canadian culture, support democratic life, and through a wide range of content that informs, enlightens, and entertains. And I want to bring your attention to our values that are on the right, because it's integrity, creativity, inclusiveness, and I think it goes really well with sustainable procurement. So These are all the logos of some of our services. I hope you listen, watch some of the content. I have to say, I learn new content. For example, Mage, which is en français. It's a really interesting place where you can learn the news for kids. And actually, I use it all the time. So please go and find some new services. It's very good content. Also, to give you a magnitude of the support we have, and so that's all the transmission sites, and everywhere we have radio, television, or web. And so you can see it's really from coast to coast to coast. Now let's dive in sustainable procurement. What is it? So sustainable procurement has two pillars, the social pillar and the environmental pillar. And the social pillar is really about reducing barriers for suppliers from underrepresented groups, but also to maximize participation. For example, someone that has a handicap. So it's really to have full participation and also to promote vendors that have equity, diversity, and inclusion practices. For the environmental pillar, it's really to increase the number of environmental products and services that we buy, and also to promote vendors that have sustainability policies and practices. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainable procurement needs change management, and an efficient one. So these are kind of the success factors to do an effective sustainable procurement initiative. First, you need to make sure you have executive support. You need to make sure you have alignment with objectives of your organization. Then you need to have a strong procurement group and a driver. So, having strong procurement vision, collaborating with all the stakeholders, and having very positive relationship. Leadership, you need to convince on the need for change and obtain resources. And so that's very important. Do not underestimate the power of leadership. And we're going to focus on that today, really change management, having effective policies, the tools you need, and effective communication to make sure the change is sustainable. And of course, measure success. And Caroline talked about it a little bit. We need to measure. So that's the start. So now let's have another kind of angle. Be strategic. I talked about it. Align with your corporate objectives. Find this great alignment. Policy. If you want sustainable procurement to be successful, it needs to be mandatory. If it's not mandatory, you will not be effective. Impactful. In sustainable procurement, we cannot do everything. You cannot put sustainability in every project or every procurement. Prioritize which one will make the best impact. Supported. You need training, you need tool. I'll give you examples of that. And finally, measure and improve. What gets measured gets done. So make sure you have measurement to be able to look at what is your program and how effective it is. So that's very fast. I hope you all are okay with that. So let's look at the strategic priorities at CBC Radio Canada. So we have 4, and I'll spend the 5th one on the right at the end. So we have the environmental plan, greening our story. We have the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's progress and progress. We have an accessibility plan, and we have an indigenous strategy. So sustainable procurement supports these 4 initiatives. And this is how, I said, make sure you align with your strategic objectives. This is how we align, and this is how the program was set up. Now, the 5th one is that, I don't know if you know, but there's a new law in Canada in January 2024, and that's the law to fight against forced labor and child labor. And so organizations now have to report annually. So that's the new angle. It's more the ethical angle of the sustainable procurement. So that's also under my responsibility. So these are all quotes from Catherine Tate, which is the president and CEO of CBC Radio Canada. I'm not going to read them. It's just to say that she supports every strategic plan, and she fully supports sustainable procurement. And so just want to say that we had full support for this initiative. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of the concrete example. For the policy side of things, making things mandatory, we did 2 things. We created the vendor code of conduct, which sets out expectation for our vendors, what they need to abide by. And that's included in all our contracts. So we have that. And also, and we launched that on August 2023. And at the same date, we had the directive on sustainable procurement. That directive makes it mandatory to include environmental and social consideration in the procurement process. And that's very important. And I will talk more about what the directive, how we've created the directive and why and what's the impact. More concepts, and I'm sorry, I realize there's a lot of concept, but I think, if you're from procurement, you will understand these elements. So if you want to be impactful with the directive or in your procurement process and how to include sustainability, you need to be early. Early engagement is so important in procurement. We all know sometimes people come and they say it's for tomorrow. Well, try to make sure you're engaged early in the process and also included in the process. The second square in blue, sustainability integration needs to be included in the procurement flow. Also, it needs to focus on the right categories. I talked about that, and it needs to be impactful. And when I say impactful is that you need to reserve points in your evaluation for that. So let's see how we've done it at CBC Radio Canada. First, when there's a procurement need, so, the business unit that needs to buy something, they need to go through an intake process. The intake process is just a questionnaire that asks questions about what are you buying, what's the value, what category, and that's where we included the sustainability questions into that intake process. And if it's one of the 14 high impact categories, because we prioritize these 14 impact categories, I'll explain why after. And if it's over $500,000, it automatically engages sustainability expert to support the business unit. So that's how we've done it to be integrated and impactful. And as I said, we need to reserve points for sustainability. And so we decided to, in the directive, make it mandatory to reserve some points for the sustainability criteria that we're going to put in this process. Okay, let's continue. Now I'm going to focus a little bit more on the environmental side of things, and then I will do the social, because otherwise going back and forth is a little difficult. I will take a sip of water and I'll continue. And I'm watching time. I think I'm doing good. So as I told you, thank you, Richard. So in our Greening Our Story, there's a specific objective. And I said, you need to make sure we measure. So we do measure, and when we measure publicly, we have a target. 25% of our request for proposal needs to include a sustainability criteria by 2026. And that's in like a year, not even a year and a half. So that's why we had to develop this directive on sustainable procurement specifically to meet this target. So I talked about the 14 categories. How did we come up with these 14 categories? We did a high impact analysis. So we looked at the volume of spend, what procurement brought the most GHG emissions, what are the environmental risks, the opportunity, the market maturity depends on the type of procurement we're doing, where can we use third-party certification, and also some of the risk, the significant public profile. And so that's how we came up with these 14 categories. Maybe you're wondering what is included in these 14 categories. So of course we have construction, transportation. We also have all the IT equipment, but we also have digital. We're a very digital organization. So we have this category, so software, and it's not an easy category to put sustainability, but we had to include it in. So that's in a nutshell, the analysis. I already talked about that. So we reserve points for sustainable procurement, but we do not touch technical and financial. They still, of course, your good and your service needs to meet the need. So that's technical. Then while they evaluate financial, we evaluate sustainability. And then in the general ranking, that's where you can have an impact. So that's how we do it to make sure there's an impact. And I really encourage to reserve points, because if the supplier takes the time to answer your question and give you evidence, make sure it makes a difference. I'm talking about evidence. So of course, in procurement, we want to give points on evidence. So when we buy, more environmental products, we want to have third-party certification to avoid greenwashing. So that's important. And also when we ask vendors and suppliers, do you have an environmental policy, a practice? Do you measure GHG emission? We want them to make sure it's based on standard, and we want to have a proof. We want to see some evidence and information in the bid. Now, I copy-paste some of the criteria. So I was saying, everyone, if you can take an action, you can use these criteria. This has been put on Merck's. This is public information. These are some of the criteria, and I won't talk about all of them. Just want to make sure you understand there's some criteria that are on product and service, on what we buy, and the criteria I will show after is from who we buy from. So some basic examples: certified product. Anytime there's third-party certification and it's available and it's, you can use that. I want to talk a little bit about the internet one. So we've started asking questions about the supplier needs to tell us what is our GHG emission for our network usage. And that's super important, because if you want to reduce, you need to know first. So in our contract, we really start to ask the impact of what we're using in the contract. And if some supplier can give us this information, that's where we want to start to make sure we start measuring so that we can reduce. So that's important for especially internet. For the data center and all the software, we really focus on energy management. Do they have energy management system? And that relates to what we just heard from Caroline. And also, are they using clean energy? So these are kind of questions we ask for data center and cloud-based software. Now, some example for suppliers is really, do they have environmental strategy, program? Do they report with an ESG report? Do they have e-waste program? Do they measure GHG emission? Of course, this is so important. And do they have GHG reduction targets based on science? So that's some examples. One thing I want to say, when you use criteria, make sure they're not too easy or too hard to meet, because look at your pool of suppliers and your category. If it's too easy, everyone will have all the points. If it's too hard, everyone will have 0. You're not making a difference. So make sure you use these criteria according to the market maturity. So you need to do a little research first. We also, one thing we use is a response grid. Why? Because it's at first, we did a lot of pilot when we started, and some suppliers were just sending us, here's my ESG report. Good luck, find your points in there. So we really asked them, okay, where can we find this? This is the question. Please put the answer, what page? And we put the onus on the supplier to tell us, so that's easy to evaluate. So I suggest a response grid to help evaluate. Before I talked a little bit about being supported, so I cannot put more emphasis on the fact that sustainable procurement is a collaborative effort. And you need sustainability expert to put the right criteria in. You need the procurement team, because they are the one putting the language in. You need internal tools, and also you need to build capacity. And that I'm talking about the Champion program that I'm going to talk more here. So we have we ask for volunteers in the organization. So 31 person raised their hand. I was super happy with that. And we gave them special training to learn about sustainability and be able to evaluate suppliers and engage them, so that sustainability is more a reflex now. It's integrated in all our thinking. That's really what we want to do. And I'm very happy with this program. Employees are super happy. Some of them, they work in archives. I have journalists, engineer, and sustainability is not in their core mandate, but they want to support. And this has really been a good way to make a difference and build capacity in the organization. Also, you need to have really good tools. We have a lot. This is a picture of our internal. I couldn't share exactly, but that's all available internally. So we have some infographic to understand when and how we need to include sustainable procurement. We have some training capsules. So it's on set. We've been, we're CBC Radio Canada, so we have studios. So it's 5-minute training with people who are talking on a set and on specific things. And also we have library clause, these sustainability criteria. We have, as you can see on the right here, some contract requirements, some information about vendors from underrepresented groups. So make sure you have all the tools ready to implement. I'm gonna quickly finish the environmental part because I want to keep time for social. So I'm really happy to say that we met 17%. So after a year, we evaluated. And so the target is 25. The first year was building all of that, the directive, the tools, engaging, experimenting. And so 17% for the first year, I think is pretty good. And for the last 2 quarters, we were at 29%. So looking forward for next year to meet the objective. So let's go into a little bit of the social elements. So the goal is really to include diverse and Indigenous suppliers in our procurement, and also promote suppliers who have equity, diversity, and inclusion practices. Soon we'll add accessible procurement. We're working on it. We didn't launch with accessibility in our procurement. We do sometimes have questionnaire on accessibility, but we're doing a whole new set of tools and implementation for accessibility. So you won't see it in the slides, but just so you know, we are working on it. If you're not aware of supplier diversity initiatives, so it's really to include suppliers from underrepresented group. We have 5 at CBC Radio Canada. The 5 underrepresented group are racialized people, women, LGBTQ2+, the Indigenous people, and veterans and people with disabilities. And an underrepresented supplier is someone that is 51% owned, managed, and operated by one of these 5 underrepresented groups. And so what's mandatory in our directive is really to invite vendors from underrepresented group. So we do have procurement by invitation when it's under our trade agreement, which is CFTA. And CFTA stands for Canadian Free Trade Agreements. And so when we are by invitation, it's mandatory to look for a supplier from an underrepresented group and invite them to the procurement. Of course, it's not all categories that have that coverage, but most of the time when we look for a supplier from an underrepresented group, we find one. And actually, we find one because we are members of 3 supplier councils. Supplier councils are organizations that certify underrepresented groups. So WeBe Canada certifies women in business. CAMC certifies racialized people in business. And now it's actually, my slide is not up to date. Sorry for that. It's Canadian Council for Indigenous Business, CCIB, and it certifies Indigenous businesses. So we have access to a list of pool of suppliers that are certified. One thing we've done, in addition to our supplier councils, we developed a supplier portal at CBC Radio Canada. So we ask suppliers to subscribe to our portal, and they can identify if they're from an underrepresented group. And with that, we developed the supplier searching tool. And up to now, we have 304 suppliers that subscribe to our portal. 67% of them are from underrepresented group. So that builds to our list of suppliers from underrepresented groups that we have from our supplier councils. I see some question on the side, and I think I'm almost done. Yes, I'm almost done. There's only one key element I want to say. We have an initiative video, so a 3-minute that summarizes everything that I said. So please go watch it. I won't play it today. So I just want to, this is my call to action. So please start implementing now. Start small, do some pilot, build on your success. I also want to say that do not start from scratch. There's so many good tools out there. And I saw that Bob is on the line. So there's the Sustainability Advantage. This is free. This is the only thing I'm going to say that's free. So please have a look. Bob, I'm sure you can put that on the link in the chat. But there's also CBSR, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility. They have an amazing program on the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Program. So please look at that, CBSR. There's also ECPAR, which is in Quebec, et c'est en français. C'est une organisation qui vraiment aide les organisations publiques, privées à être ensemble et travailler sur l'approvisionnement responsable. Ils ont des super outils, incluant des analyses de cycle de vie. Donc, ECPAR, E-C-P-A-R, and also in English, CCSP, Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement, and that's led by Tim Reeve. And they also collaborate, have webinars, tools on sustainable procurement. So with all these 4 resources, start with that and you're on your way to be strategic and impactful and implement sustainable procurement. So thank you so much, and please visit our corporate website. And if you're a supplier, subscribe to our portal. I stopped here because I saw some good questions.
Parfait. Merci, Annick. C'est très bien. C'est très intéressant for everyone here. So really good intro. Thank you for that. And yeah, and just because you mentioned some of the other resources, we're obviously, as part of the SPP, looking, in contact with those organizations to try and make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel. But as we talked about with Bob, how we can kind of be that kind of spin wheel, shouting, directing everyone to all the different resources that are available in Canada. En français aussi, en anglais. So absolument. So Carson, we have a few questions.
Absolutely. Actually, a couple of questions. Thank you, Annick, for a great presentation. Really appreciate that. So let me get into the questions. They're pretty long, so forgive me. I'm going to read some of them up. The first one is, you mentioned making sustainability mandatory as part of the procurement process. Sometimes there's a real cost associated with implementing these initiatives. So are CBC currently ready to source a higher cost option? And if so, how do they manage this? Is there a budget allocation, for example? So I guess the ever recurring question about cost implications of sustainability.
Of course.
How do you manage that, Annick?
Yeah, so of course, I will tell how we do it. But first, I just want to say that I think we need to get out of low cost and lowest cost for best value, because we know the cost of climate change is way bigger than anything else. But let me answer really for CBC Radio Canada. So it's mandatory to include sustainable criteria, and we reserve points. And when we did this directive on sustainable procurement, we went to see all the VPs to make sure everyone is okay. So we reserve a certain amount of points. So we're ready to pay a little bit more, because we're not, and I know, some of the best practice, we would like to keep 20%, but that's not what has been approved. I'm not allowed to say what's the percentage we reserve, but if you go on Merck's, you will see the information. So we reserve a range of points, and that's how we manage. When we say highest cost, this is how we do it. However, I want to say it's not always highest cost, because we don't always do total cost of ownership, and the cost of, more impactful or not green elements is not fully taken into consideration. So we really focus on best value, and that's how we think it is the way to go. And we had approval from all VPs, so that's how we've done it.
That's great, Annick. Thank you. You actually answered my question there as well.
Okay.
Next one is, what positive impact have sustainable procurement had on CBC's overall performance, and which KPIs were impacted positively? Any positive impact on viewership ratings or advertising revenue? So this, I guess, relates to your branding and so on.
Yes, great question. So let me just start by saying that, of course, we have a public objective, and it's more on process, right? We need to include sustainability criteria in RFP. So that's more on the process. It's not on the impact. It's very hard to measure the impact of sustainable procurement. We're working towards it, but we're not yet at the out-based measurement. However, I'm going to say that I think there would be a reputational risk of not putting sustainability up front. Same with equity, diversity, and inclusion, accessibility, Indigenous. These are all priorities for Canadian and for our audience. So I think it's super important to put that. So it's more, for now, there's no, I cannot say I helped save that ton of GHG emission. I want to be able one day to say that, and I'm trying to work with some organization I named on towards that, but we're not there yet. But I would say that it's very positive. We are leaders on sustainable procurement. Other crown corporations are asking us to present our initiative. I think it has a good impact on the organization. Now in the media, sorry, I'm trying to make this short. on the media, so they're also working on greening the media industry. It has some environmental impact to advertising and media industry. And so there's a lot of sustainability effort, and we are collaborating, and because they are doing measurement on advertising, I'm doing measurement on suppliers. We need to meet in the middle and understand, what are you using? What am I using? And collaborating to make sure we all have the same set of data. And then we'll be more able to say, this is the impact. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Annick. It kind of segues into the next question around, you mentioned diversity and so on. This is from Veronica. Is the cost of membership to these organizations significant for smaller businesses? The ones you mentioned in your social and diversity slide. Is there a budget within CBC allocated for self-declared diverse business who cannot afford the certification? So there's always this concern, of course, that the cost of certification is pushed down to the small companies. And here's a question around that.
So I really like this question because that's why we did the supplier portal. We do have certification supplier councils with lists, but we do accept in our portal some self-declared underrepresented group that are not certified. So we have both approach because we understand it's not easy for a small and medium enterprise, and we want to be the most equitable and transparent and open as possible. So that's why we did the supplier portal. So any small supplier, please subscribe to our portal. We're looking for you, and we want to do business with you. So, and I'm also presenting in many other places to, like the DEFY conference that was about supplier diversity, and the WeBe Canada and other places. We are going there, and we actually have a QR code that we show, and we're like, just subscribe to our portal. So, yeah.
Great, Annick, thank you. I think we can all learn a lot from CBC and yourself. Last question here in the chat is around training. So what kind of training do you actually offer to your procurement practitioners to get this level of understanding? You said it was a reflex, so that's pretty cool.
So as I said, we have 4 training that is we did on set. So we are presenting the concept, and we also had support from the training group in CBC Research Canada. So we developed these 4 training that are like the basic on how to do social diversity and environmental sustainability in procurement. So we did these 4 training on set, so it's available to all employees. It's on YouTube, but it's internal YouTube, so I cannot share, but that's what we've done. In addition to that, I like training and people, and I saw people from my previous PSPC world, and they will remember that I also did a champion program in PSPC. I really like training and developing training. So it's all done in-house. It's me and some other experts in sustainability that we train people. And, we go to the essential and we build that. And actually, I recorded myself. So now it's available for if we want new champions. And so, this is, I think, an easy way if you have someone that likes to train and it's a PowerPoint, what is greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, 2, 3. And we keep it simple and we just train people, and people are super interested and curious. So that's how we've done it.
And you said you put it on YouTube, so people can watch it while they're commuting. And
it's all internal. It's not available to public, but it's all available to our employees. Yeah, and we're a pretty big organization, so it can reach out a lot of people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Back to you, Richard.
Perfect. I actually have one question, which is. We've had a couple of these sessions, Annick, and obviously another SPP session. Some of the conversation is around whereby, so you've got the portal where you can do the self-declaration, the suppliers can do self-declaration. And there's been quite a lot of debate between generation of new portals, generation of new tools for suppliers to sign up to versus the plethora of other tools that are around. And some of the suppliers that I speak with, they say, not about you guys, but they just say, we've been asked by another OEM, original equipment manufacturer, to fill in this one and then to fill in this. So why did you go around the portal loop? It was then not one that was able to service everyone. Why did you generate your own portal? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So I guess the main reason is because we had the internal capacity to do a portal. Well, two things. We didn't want to rely only on certification and supplier councils because there's a cost, and we wanted to include and give opportunity to the smaller organizations that either choose or don't have the capacity. So that's the main reason, is that we wanted to have another place for everyone to be able to participate. And actually, it was already existing prior to that initiative. It was just a Google sheet. Want to do business with CBC Radio Canada? Fill this out. Now what we've done is that we included suppliers from underrepresented group, and also we've linked it to a supplier searching tool so that employees have access to that. Because it's great if you have a list, but when you have an Excel list that nobody knows about, it's not efficient. So that's why we did the supplier searching tool, and that's all internal. And also, why did we go internal? Because you probably saw on the news, we're on a tight budget, and we're very looking into our expense and making sure we do some good analysis and use of its public money. So we did that in-house. It was way, way, way cheaper than outside. We have some very good capacity. We have some good IT people, and yeah, it was a really good project to just, it's just a list into a tool, and it's all done by Power BI, so everyone can use it. So yeah, as I said, we're very creative. We have to be creative, not a lot of resource, not a lot of budget, and we have to do and show leadership. So we use creativity and the creativity of our employees, and that's what we've done.
Thank you, Annick. Appreciate that. Well, thank you very much. We are past our 3 to 4 time, but as I mentioned, we deliberately always add in an extra 15 minutes because we know we get a lot of good engagement, good questions. So we do have a few more minutes. Maybe just to start, I'd just like to say, once again, thank you very much. Fantastic presentations, Caroline and also Annick. Merci beaucoup, c'est très bien. And really, we have a few more minutes. If there's any final questions for either Annick or for Caroline, we will be, as we mentioned before, having this recorded. It will be put onto YouTube. We'll be sharing that with everyone, and then I'll also be getting a collection of the presentations from both Annick and Caroline, which we can distribute at a point in time. So with that, if there's any more questions, please raise them now.
Not a question, Richard, but I just wanted to thank you and your guests for giving us such an in-depth kind of presentation. It was extremely helpful. So thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you. And please take an action today. And if someone wants to share, you can reach out to me and say, I've tried this criteria, or I'm always happy. Some people, I've presented this presentation in the past, and some people reached out and said, Annick, I did my first project and my pilot, and it's always very great to hear, and I'm happy to see that. So don't hesitate to reach out to me and, tell me, or if you have a question, or please reach out.
Thank you. Okay, well, the presentations were that good. All questions were answered. So thank you both. Okay, well, if we've got no questions, then I'll call an end to the meeting. And once again, thank you very much. And we'll be following up shortly with links to the YouTube video, the recording, as well as the presentations. So thank you very much to our presenters, Caroline and Annick. And thank you, everyone, for attending the call. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, have a nice night, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.